The basement under our college language lab turned out to be an abandoned secret society from the 1800s. The building had originally belonged to the society. It had about an inch of water on the floor in certain parts, long hallways and no lights, but the really weird part was the main room that had vaulted ceilings supported by pillars with stone skulls as an architectural detail. Atop these skulls were metal spikes, presumably for mounting candles. At the front of the room was an altar with a backstage area behind it. There was a chair back there and a paper with some questions on it. There was another room that was locked from the outside and only had a sofa in it. We brought friends back a second night, but by the third attempt someone was onto us and the entrance was padlocked. One comment under the original story asked about the questions on the paper they found. It was a long time ago, but they were somewhat leading and very specific. We thought they might have been questions for pledges or initiates, almost as if the inductee had shared very personal information with one person and was now going to be put in a position to have to reveal it in front of the entire group. This was not one of the questions, but they were structured similar to this. What happened to you when you went on the bus trip to see your aunt when you were in 8th grade? When I was around 14 to 15, I was on a family trip in Switzerland. I'm the youngest of 3 brothers, and we would always go exploring when we were on family vacations. We were staying at the base of a mountain, and one night my brothers and I decided to go walk around a little outside. We ended up stumbling upon this cave that had signs all around it saying, "Entrance forbidden." Being 3 teenagers, we of course decided to check it out. We started walking into this cave, and about 20 to 30 feet in, it became super dark and cold. We slowed down and decided we probably shouldn't go any further. Just as I was about to turn around, I felt something brush up against my hand. I told my brothers to stop and that it wasn't funny, but they were far away enough that it couldn't have been them. I then reached out in front of me and felt this wet, furry thing. At this point I started to panic, but I remembered I had a flashlight in my backpack, so I grabbed it. I turned the light on, and to my horror, I saw rows and rows of dead deer hanging upside down with their stomachs open. Worse, they were all still dripping blood, which I then realized was all over my hands. I guess some hunters had hung up a bunch of deer, and apparently this had happened pretty recently too. Either way, we ran out of there like our lives depended on it, and we never told our parents. It was definitely one of the creepiest things I've ever seen. Just outside my college town was an old, abandoned house down a dirt road that people used to go hang out and drink in. Me and my friends used to go looking for ghosts there. We would drive out to the house and cut our engine and headlights so the neighbors wouldn't call the cops. The whole place was falling apart. I'd have loved to see it back in the day. It was at least 2 stories and a cellar. I never went upstairs because the steps looked like they were going to fall apart. We used to find jugs with weird liquids, shoes with nails on the bottom, and lots of evidence that the place had been abandoned for decades. The thing that made us nope the out of there, however, was the shed outside the kitchen window. It was full of dead turkeys. At first, we assumed some animal was dragging its regular meal in there, but you could tell by looking at them that they'd had their heads smashed in and the rest of their bodies were completely untouched. Nothing was eating them. They were just piling up the corpses to rot in there. You could see the older corpses underneath the newer ones, just piles of old feathers and bones. We came back a few times after that, and it was pretty much the same every time. We have no explanation for what was going on there. When we were about 12 years old on a rainy, dark day, a few of us decided we wanted to see what was inside the abandoned house down the road. The house was near the end of a cul-de-sac and had a massive, unkempt yard with old, probably antique, cars scattered all over in various states of disrepair. The trees were overgrown and a small segment of the roof had caved in just above the bathroom bathtub. The whole house had a dark, eerie vibe. We slipped through a hole in the fence and made our way through the premises. We had to step over fallen branches, rotten plant matter, and a bunch of garbage before we got to the front door. It was locked. One of our friends climbed through a window and came around to let us in, and that's where the fun started. Inside was a house that transported you back 35 years in time. There were couches and furniture in that old style, and everything was dusty and moldy. The electronics were gone. There was no TV or sound system or anything, but every single other piece of the former owner's life was still there, just as it had been when they left. We made our way to the bedroom, where there were stale, moldy sheets still on the bed, and the chest of drawers had one drawer pulled open. Inside were mounds of stale clothes. I lifted them and found 3 harmonicas stashed underneath, encased in fancy cases. They looked pretty expensive. As we left the bedroom, we saw a few frameless photographs that had been stuck on the wall, the corners all turned up with age. One picture was of the house back in its glory days. The sun was shining, the lawn was tidy, the trees were trimmed, and on the edge of the roof was a man, sitting down and playing the harmonica that I now held in my hand. 2 of us made our way to the kitchen while another 2 went outside to check out an old rounded caravan/trailer type thing that was parked out back. The kitchen had no refrigerator and no stove. There were cups and plates in the cupboards and a few old spice jars. There was also a whiskey bottle on a cupboard shelf, and my friend moved to grab it, but as soon as he did, the cupboard shelf that it stood on gave way and the bottle, along with the plates and whatever else was in the cupboard, came crashing down. At the exact same time, a loud siren began sounding. We hightailed it out of there and navigated our way through the garden until we found the opening in the fence and slipped through. As we got out, our 2 friends who had gone to the caravan appeared and frantically made their way through the fence. One of the friends was carrying a stack of magazines in his hand, and another friend yelled, "Drop it!" He dropped them, and we all ran home. To this day, we still have no idea what that siren was, or what exactly caused it. It sounded kind of like a war siren that would have been used back in the day to warn people of enemy bombers. To add on to the story, we also found out that an old man next door owned the house, which begs the question, why did he leave so much of his stuff in it? Was he the man in the photograph? Did he sound the siren? It actually turns out that that man was murdered in his house last year during a burglary. I guess we'll never know the answers for sure. There was this old abandoned house that my friends and I had found. It was super cool and had become quite the attraction to take people to. We hung out there quite a bit and we got pretty comfortable being there. Maybe a little too comfortable. One day, me and a buddy were there and everything was normal. We left for 2 hours to meet up with some other buddies and some girls, and we decided to take them to the house at night. It had only been 3 or 4 hours since we'd last been there, but things were seriously different. I was starting to freak out a bit because everyone was meandering around slowly and brushing off my, "No, guys, this is seriously different," thinking that I was just trying to spook them. We got to the end of a hall, and we saw that a mattress had been placed on the front door. Like a group of idiots, we called out, and we received no response. We walked into another room, and we saw another mattress propped up on the wall with a bunch of porno mags stuck to it with arrows. These arrows didn't look like they had come from a hunting store or anything. They looked homemade. We all stopped in our tracks when we saw this, and then, all of a sudden, we heard somebody running away outside. We quickly decided to do the same, and we noped out of there real fast. To this day, we have no idea who that person was and what they were doing there, but it still creeps me out to think about it.